Late one night, a teenage boy and his girlfriend were on their way to a nightclub. They were driving at high speed along a deserted motorway when they spotted a crashed car by the side of the road. They pulled over and got out to see if they could help. The windscreen was smashed and one of the doors was hanging open. Inside the car, they found the dead bodies of two men. Their faces were completely covered in blue spots. One of the men was clutching two large jars in his hands. One of the jars was empty, but the other was filled with a bright blue liquid. "Shouldn't we call the police?" asked the girl. "No way," replied the boy, shaking his head. "They'll just keep us waiting here for hours and we'll miss the nightclub. Anyway, these dudes are dead. What do they care? Let someone else find them and call the cops." The girl just shrugged her shoulders and went back to their car. The boy lingered by the crashed vehicle. He was curious about the blue jar and decided to take it with him. He went back to his car, got in, and placed the jar of blue liquid on the back seat. Then, he revved up the engine and drove off. As they were speeding down the motorway, the girl looked into the back seat. "What's in the jar?" she asked. "Who knows?" replied the boy. "If you're curious, go ahead and take a look." The girl reached into the back seat and picked up the jar. She held it up close to her face and peered inside. The blue liquid was swirling around, and she spotted something swimming in it. "Honey, there's a weird blue slug or something inside," she said. "Whatever it is, it's alive." Suddenly, the blue slug pressed itself up against the glass and opened its mouth, revealing a row of sharp teeth. "Ugh, it's disgusting," she cried. Taken by surprise, the girl tossed the jar away from her. The boy tried to catch it, taking his hands off the steering wheel. He didn't realize that they were approaching a sharp bend in the road. They were going too fast. The girl screamed and made a grab for the wheel, but it was too late. The car crashed through the guardrail and careened over the edge of the cliff. It rolled down the hill, and the occupants inside were tossed back and forth like rag dolls. Eventually, it came to a rest against a big tree at the bottom of the hill. The teenagers lay unconscious and injured in the wreckage. When the boy woke up, he didn't know how much time had passed. All he knew was that he was in a lot of pain. Pieces of the smashed jar lay on the dashboard in front of him. He looked up and saw a large blue slug crawling up the steering wheel. He couldn't move. The slug bared its teeth, and the boy let out a hideous scream as it bit into his face. A few hours later, a driver who was passing by spotted the wrecked car and called the police. An ambulance arrived and transported the injured teenagers to the nearest hospital. The doctors who examined them were puzzled by the blue spots that covered the skin on the boy's face. There were blue spots on lips, on his tongue. When they took a closer look at the girl, they found the same blue spots all over her legs. The doctors were unable to diagnose the symptoms. All they could say was that the pair were suffering from an unknown illness. After operating on their injuries, the young couple were placed in a sterile room by themselves. They were kept isolated from the rest of the patients in the hospital because the doctors were afraid that their strange illness might be contagious. The last thing they wanted was to have an epidemic on their hands. A week passed, and the doctors were still confounded. The effects of the mysterious disease had become much worse. It was feared that the young boy and girl would die if the doctors couldn't find the correct antibiotics to cure them. The blue spots had grown larger, completely covering their entire bodies. Their skin had become dry and brittle, tearing with the slightest movement. The teenagers had lost all of their hair, and their internal organs were visible through their thin, translucent skin. Despite all of this, the teenagers were still alive. However, nobody wanted to go near them. The nurses feared that they too might contract the disease. Not even the doctors would examine them without donning masks and thick gloves. They would have liked to just get rid of the unfortunate pair, but it was illegal to bury someone alive. A few weeks later, the state of the two teens had become monstrous. Their bodies had begun to swell and change color. Their internal organs were now blue as well. Even the blood flowing through their veins was blue, and yet, they were still alive. One morning, a nurse was passing by their room when she happened to hear strange and disturbing noises coming from within. Bravely, she entered the room. A few seconds later, she came running out. Her face was pale and she was trembling uncontrollably. She had seen two large blue slugs slowly crawling across the ceiling.